You don't know.
Okay, let's begin.
Why do they all have letter E's on top of them?
Who?
They do?
Okay.
They do.
No, you don't.
They just have lines on top of them.
Yeah,
Okay.
but some of the lines go the other way for some reason.
Okay,
Dude, the
so
back looks cooler than the front.
okay. Today we're going to learn about ray tracing. Now, you might wonder what ray tracing is.
Do we
Okay.
need to make a new
There you
file?
No, so right now we're going to
Ray tracing is a rendering technique.
yes, it is. Thank you. Yeah, so ray tracing is a rendering technique, but then here, before I start explaining, we're going to render this. Okay, I'll explain what it is first, but then if you see my monitor here, if you want to render anything in the scene, there's this tab called render on
Your
the
screen is
top.
frozen.
I guess it is frozen.
Why are you attempting to connect to right brain? What?
He connects it to his computer, and he connects his computer to that, because his computer is an Apple.
Yes, that's true.
Damn, that's big brain.
Yeah, actually, so
Can you send me that app?
okay, later.
Can you touch stuff on here and look at it?
Yeah. Okay, now it should be
Yes?
fine.
So you can mess with it.
Wait, will this app work for two Apple devices? Like, can I connect my laptop to my work off of my iPad?
Yeah, it should work.
Oh, awesome, because I have one app for that and it's like completely fails and it would be great for drawing photos.
Okay, so let's begin. Here, there's this tab called Render, and if you click it, you'll see two tabs. Render Image and Render Animation. But here, we're not making a video, so we're just going to press Render Image. Now, you'll notice that,
It's very pixelated.
yeah, things are going to take some time.
It's making something.
But then, if you see mine, it's pretty fast.
Wow, because
Wow.
you have a
No, it's
cool
not EV.
computer.
Yeah, so
Just because you can afford a better computer, it's so unfair.
okay, so I'll explain how this works, alright? So, actually, Luis, can you film me with this
Why is
video?
mine taking a year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll explain why.
I have
So,
very unstable hands.
it's fine, it's fine.
What am I supposed to do?
Just film me.
Film you.
I can do it.
Here we go.
So,
I
you...
don't know if you click any buttons. I don't know how your phone works.
Okay.
I think I did it. Okay, we're good. We're good.
Okay, so, let's first discuss how light works in the real world. So, you have the light source, right? And then you have the object, and there is your eye or camera. Now, every light source will emit these photons, or well, just light, which will reflect or bounce off an object. And then these light rays will come into your eyes, and then we perceive it as light or color. Okay, so ray tracing is basically a technique where we simulate that backwards. Now, a light source will emit like infinitely a lot of photons and light rays. So then a computer would not be able to calculate all of that, because even in this room only, there's like countless light rays everywhere that's bouncing off every surface that we can see. So since a computer can't calculate like all of that, they do it backwards. That's why it's called ray tracing, because we're tracing it backwards. Now, if this is the camera of the scene, it's going to, for each pixel, they're going to see where these pixels line up, see what kind of object is there, determine the object's color, and then it'll see where it bounces off. They calculate the angle, and then it's going to see which light source or wherever else it's going to land on the scene, which means that it's going to be able to know what color comes next every time it bounces off an object. This also means that if there are multiple objects, it can bounce off multiple times until it reaches the light source. Now, since this calculation of the angles and where each light path bounces off each object is done for each pixel, it's going to take a long time. And can you take a picture of your screen? Yeah, so if you'll notice, your rendering will not be quite done yet, but then if you see that, it's done like already, which took around 33 seconds.
Wow.
Now, as I told you, this is a complicated process for just one pixel. And an average image is going to be 1080p, which means it's 1080 pixels by 1920 pixels. So it's 1080 times 1920 times the computer needs to do this bouncing simulation every time. So the difference between the my computer here and the other computers there.
Your video says it stopped recording because apparently you don't have enough storage.
Okay.
Damn.
Okay, it ended right where I needed to, which is good.
I think so, unless it was not recording anything for a while. But it'll be good.
Okay, that's good.
Can I get dinner while it's rendering?
Sorry?
How much time do you think it will take?
Wait, HP minus.
Hey, mine is almost
just
done,
like
and
this.
That's because you
That is I
won't.
don't
It's
have
a little
anything.
worse than
Oh,
you.
it's because we haven't. That's another
Okay.
scene.
Okay. I gotta be very good.
Okay, so
You're low.
now I'll explain why it takes so long to do it on your computer.
Did you get a pickle with
Oh wait, are you there?
That took like
Well,
15% of my charge.
So
God.
could you download the file that I sent you?
You must 50% of your charge of
15.
Yeah, so if you go to the email,
Yeah.
Your
your
battery
battery
is
files,
just broken.
one's called something
My
RayTracing,
battery is
one's
fine.
Or maybe HP is sending us a virus.
Battery in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
Just like
I know.
Yep.
The last computer we
Open
had,
that,
my dad
you should
replaced
be
the
able to
battery
see
by
it.
himself without going to Apple or anything.
Oh
And
yeah,
then
I
we
hate
did
when
it
my
so
dad's
long
always like,
ago.
I'm right, and then when you go to any
We
professional,
were like,
there's
can we
like keys
replace the
wrong.
battery again because it broke after
Like,
it
he was like-
charges
So I was like, Dad,
And
my
then the guy
wrist is
came back,
hurting.
he's
He's like,
like,
okay, type with your wrist on the.
So just explain how
I go to the doctor and they're like, keep it elevated.
When you're carrying
Okay,
like
so
video,
like
they blame everything.
Is it just
bouncing
off?
They're like, if you're playing video
So,
games, and then you come later,
calculating
like,
how-
Mom,
so, like, light
my
works
head
by,
hurts, I have a headache, my
like,
stomach
That's
hurts.
just
you
make
have,
video
like,
games.
with that background,
Dude,
and see what color light is there.
Yesterday
For
I
each
sent my
pixel. Okay. So this is rather off topic, but then okay, so I'm pretty sure we all know what a CPU is, right? So just in simple concept, it's like the brain of the computer. It does all the operations a computer will usually do. But then, so right now, I'm pretty sure all of your computers are rendering the scene using a CPU to process everything. On the other hand, my computer uses this thing called the GPU. So does anyone here know what a GPU is? All right, can you explain?
Graphics card.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens is it usually assists the CPU in more graphical tasks. So for example, a CPU has 4 tunnels, right? So if there's like a lot of traffic, like the CPU lane is very fast. But then, since there are only like 4 tunnels, if there's like a big load of things to do or like a lot of cars, it's going to take a long time. Now the GPU tunnel is a bit slower, but then it has like thousands and hundreds of these tunnels. So which means even though the tunnel itself might be slower than the CPU, since it has so many more tunnels, it's going to process all these cars much more faster than the CPU can. Now same thing here. Since the CPU is trying to process all these little pixels every time, it's going to take a long time to process all of these, even though a CPU itself is faster as a process than a GPU. Now, right now I'm running 3 GPUs at the same time, which means it's going to be pretty fast. Okay, so if you want to do this magical switch into the GPU, you can follow here right there. So you can see over here. Okay. Is this still moving or no? Did it freeze? Oh my goodness. Okay, it's kind of moving. So okay, let's exit out this window. If it's not done, press escape. Then you should be able to stop the rendering process. Yeah. Now, if you go to edit on the top, you should be able to go to preferences. And in preferences, if you go to this tab called system, which is around the bottom, yep, you'll see that there's going to be these 4 tabs called either none, CUDA, optics, or OpenCL. Now, the most basic algorithm, or like the system which we're going to use to render is called CUDA, but then, so try pressing CUDA, and you'll see that there's if it starts either with Intel or AMD, it's probably the CPU. Like for example, here I have the Intel Core i7. Usually for CUDA operations, the CPU is really not that recommended. So everything else you see here, these are the GPUs. Now, for example, here I have, yes?
Which one am I supposed to use?
Mine says
So,
no,
yeah,
no
mine says
compatible.
no compatible.
So yeah, that's the joke here. Apple laptops don't have GPUs.
Oh, but
Ha,
so funny. They're also very thin and light.
That's
Lighter
true. I
than
mean,
light.
I
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah,
I really
better.
do like the Apple.
They also can't
laptop
open
design.
executables.
So it's only going to take forever.
That's why we have a solution to that. But for
But
all
which one
onboard
should I use?
processes, it will take some time. But then
Which
yeah,
one should I
so
use?
you luckily do have a GeForce GPU display, so that's what you're going to use. Yes.
Should I also use Intel?
That we'll later test on because we only have. Do you know what GPU is inside here?
I think
If you don't,
Nvidia.
Nvidia. Okay, so you
I don't
don't.
know.
You don't.
I don't
Okay,
know
so yeah,
anything.
if you see here, I have 3 GPUs inside, and all of these are all Nvidia GPUs. Now, just suppose that if I did have a GPU, I would just make a checkbox here, and that should be it. Now, yeah, also jokes on you. Right now, the computer you're seeing here is not this computer. I'm remote controlling another computer that's in my dorm room.
What?
Yeah, so yeah. Yeah, so in my dorm room, it's like this ginormous laptop, which is also hooked up to this box that has another GPU. That's why it has these 3 machines that run things all together. And this laptop is merely just for remote controlling it.
How many laptops do you
So what
have?
if the one in your dorm just turns off or something?
Then
We have to
we
go
start
back
the
to your
club.
dorm?
No, I can use this.
How
but
much
then
does
it's gonna
that? How
take-
much does that entire setup cost, including this?
I'll tell you after the club.
How does that remote control? Like,
That I can also tell you after the club. Okay, so
Bro.
since you know how that works, so before remember wireframe mode?
Yeah.
Do you remember how to go into wireframe mode?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
you
well,
right
Z.
click and then you do stuff.
What?
Shush,
Wait,
shush,
what?
shush.
Yeah, Z exactly. It's
Oh, I
Z.
was totally just kidding.
huh?
Yeah, so if you go to wireframe mode, you remember we could see the insides of the object, right? But this time we're going to
Kill them.
we're going to go into this thing called material preview, which is on the bottom. And if you do that, you'll be invited back to the original view you saw in the beginning. Now, ignore like the trees you see in this ball, in the middle, but then yeah. So this will, yeah, these
Exactly.
trees.
There are trees on the ball, there are trees on the cube. If you
Yeah.
go underneath, there are trees.
Yeah, but then let's ignore that for now, okay? So this is like the material preview. So now, last time you asked like, how do you set the colors of the object? Now, the term color of the object is like a little newbie term, so we're not going to do that anymore. Instead, we're going to call these materials.
I'm gonna do it just to spite you.
It's not going to
Why?
work. Okay, so as we all know, like everything we make, or like just this building, for example, has a lot of different materials. We have wood, we have like glass, we have concrete, so we have plastic, we have so much more like different materials that define what we see and feel, right? So it's the same thing. Like in Blender, you can set the individual materials that you want, and sometimes you can make these custom materials that have specific properties that only you can give into, such as like adding a texture, like a wood texture that makes it look rough or something like that. But then today we're just going to explore the basic ones. Now, the good thing about this material preview is it gives you like this not cheap but then easy way to visualize how everything will look in this scene without actually ray tracing everything. Because if you go into rendered mode in the top, then you'll notice that everything will be rendered and things will be pretty slow.
It's Enderman.
Did you just change it to EV and then make it super fast? Oh no, that didn't work.
So material preview is like a pseudo EV. So it's not exactly like the full potential of EV, but then it's basically like the same concept, but does only just the things for productivity.
What is EV? My blender just crashed.
Yeah. So every time you use this rendered mode, you must be careful to make sure it doesn't crash.
By
Now,
the way, you remove factory.
sorry?
How do you keep it from crashing then?
How do you prevent yourself from crashing?
You just don't drop your computer.
You just said to be careful not to crash, so how do I prevent crashing?
So,
How am I careful?
okay, so did none of you didn't crash though, right?
I did.
Well, I
I
haven't
literally
been
did.
solid 5
So do you
minutes.
know what RAM is in a computer? Okay,
It's the
Storage.
processing power. Definitely.
that's very big.
Am I right?
Obviously, I'm pretty sure you understand what it is.
So
Okay,
it's basically like
No,
it's
no.
not processing power, but it's not memory.
it's
like-
memory.
It's like the ability of the computer to like do multiple things at once.
Yeah, exactly. So think of like you go to work, right? If you go to work, you're going to have to put your books and your like laptop or something like that inside your bag. So like the bag is like your RAM, and your home is like the actual storage. Now, since everything is inside your bag, you can take things out much quickly and easily for you to use like at the spot during your workspace, right? So that's like the concept of RAM. So like the bigger the bag is, the more things you can process.
Can you lose your RAM?
If you take the RAM chip out of your computer, yes, you can, and that will
So it's like your
probably.
backpack.
But that requires God interference.
For example, on my computer here, I have 64 gigabytes of RAM, which
Oh
is
shit!
pretty good. But then,
How much does my computer have?
I can't tell. But then, the thing is, so there's like the main RAM of your computer, and then there's this thing called VRAM, which is attached to your graphics card. Now, usually if your computer has really like small RAM, like 4 or 2, then just opening this file and doing some intense things will make it crash. But then, since you realize that yours crashed when rendering, right? Which means that it's the VRAM's fault. So somehow the VRAM is small, which caused like when you rendered it, then it crashed. So like if you crash while doing the render preview again, then remember it's probably the VRAM that caused it. All right.
So I shouldn't ever render again.
So I think you might need to stick with the CPU if you need to.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I should change it.
Do you remember how? So edit. So go to edit,
Preferences.
preferences,
The system.
and system, and then you
Yeah.
change whatever GPU you
Intel.
want to use.
What's
Yes.
OpenCL?
So then I should go to none, right?
Yeah,
Or should I use
so-
i5 CPU?
Okay, so OpenCL, I'll just explain it briefly. So there's this new line of GPUs called the RTX line.
Oh.
Yeah, so that has this special magic trick that lets you ray trace in real time like a video game. So that's pretty cool stuff, which means that the same thing you just saw, they can do it in just like a split second. Kind of, like not exactly, but then like kind of that way. So I don't have those GPUs yet. I'll try to get it by the end of the year, but then yeah. So if you have those GPUs, then you use OpenCL to make things faster. That's pretty much it. So yeah. So since we have like a very basic idea of how ray tracing works and how to render an image, let's see the different things inside the scene and learn about materials and other things that you will need while ray tracing or rendering an image. By the way, every time we ray trace, we say we're going to render this image to make any image we're going to make later on.
Why don't you say your ray tracer?
And it's because ray trace is a very broad term, so yeah. Okay, so here you might have noticed that this orange, this triangular black thing that's been in your scene like before, like even when making the cup. So this thing you can select it and move it around like every object. This is the camera. So if you want to go into camera view, you'll notice these 4 tabs on the right side. And here, you'll see this camera looking icon. If you press it, you'll be able to see what the camera is seeing.
Wow.
And you'll also notice that if you render this, it's the same view that came out in the image. Yeah.
If you move yourself while you're in like the camera view,
Yep.
does that also move the camera?
No. Well, there's an ability for you to do that, but I don't recommend it. Yeah. What's the question?
How do you?
Whoa, mine just
How do you
rendered
get
faster.
So you click this camera icon, then yes. And if you want to get back out of the camera view, you press the camera once more, and then you'll be able to go to the previous view you were in. Now, if you're in the camera view and you have the camera selected, which makes it orange or yellow, you can always move it around like a normal object.
Wow. Why can't you move it like backwards?
You need to use the arrows. Yeah. Okay, so since we know how, well, that's the camera now, we're going to look at the individual materials. So here let's click the blue sphere. Are we there?
Blue sphere?
Yeah. The blue sphere. This thing.
What are we doing to it? We're
Isn't
doing
it a
it?
circle?
Just select it. Yeah.
I don't have that.
Bruh.
Okay, so if you have
That's because you're in the completely wrong place.
40.
Look at his screen and then look at yours.
Yeah. What do I do?
Do you not read
We're
the
all
email?
here too. See, we all have that.
Okay, if you're like far away, then at this point I think it's better for you to just look at somebody else's. at
What
this
have you
point.
been doing
Yeah.
this entire time?
Because I want to end in like
I thought
say
it was
15
you
minutes.
made that. You
So
guys made that.
No.
Oh.
okay, so let's continue. All right.
Yes.
Okay, so if you select this, so if you just look at my the big monitor for now, if I render, you'll notice that this, yeah, so you'll see that this blue sphere, unlike in the preview mode, will emit this light in the scene. So in this box, or like this scene, there are predominantly two light sources, which is this blue one and this yellow one. Now we typically call this emission because it emits light. So if you want to see the details of each material, you need to select the object that has the material, and then on the right side there's this material tab. It looks like this spherical object with like this
Material
logo.
properties.
Yeah, exactly. So this logo is pretty much universal for like many 3D softwares, not just for CGI, but then yeah, pretty much anything else. Now here you'll be able to change the properties of the material, and there's this thing called preview. If you click it, you'll be able to see what the object will look like approximately. Yeah, so right now, as I said before, if you see over here, the surface is called emission. Now, yeah, for now we're just going to worry about the surface of the object. So,
Can we change
How
it?
did you get to
obviously,
this?
yeah.
How did you get to this?
So just press that,
Oh, it looks like
and
now.
this should come out. So
Oh,
here,
because he clicked that and it's not there.
Awesome.
he's there. So here you need to
Oh,
press preview to see this.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you'll notice that we can change the color of this light. So we can change it red if you want, like that. And we can also change the strength of the light. So right now here I have the strength as 1, but I can change that into 10, and it's going to be much brighter than before.
Wait, where
There's
did you,
a globe symbol at the bottom of like
Wait, where did you
square,
Oh, my
find
turn
the
light.
cube, that kind of stuff.
That's too bright.
Oh, that's.
In the preview,
Yeah.
what is the little globe button at the bottom? The little line.
So what are
Wow.
In the preview, there's like a square and a sphere and there's just another square underneath and stuff.
Oh yeah, these are like the different
Right, but then
objects for
what
like
is-
preview.
What is the world button?
The world button.
All the way to the bottom.
Oh, that's for the it's not that important for now, but then that's for like when you like have reflections.
Oh.
So yeah, so that's the emission material, and for like every scene, like everywhere there's light. So if you want to have a scene, you're going to add a material like this. It's something not necessarily an object, but then it's going to need a light source like this one. Now, this time let's select the metallic looking sphere that's on the floor.
With the trees.
Yes, sure, the trees.
The tree ball.
That's actually what.
Yes, so if you see this one, and if you see the materials properties, you'll see that it says principled BSDF.
Where do you go to?
Here.
Oh.
So yeah, if you click that, you'll see that there are like a bunch of different options. So you don't need to click anything at this point, but then let's just stick with what we have right now, which is the principled shader. So each of these we call shaders. And each shader has different properties that gives it a quality of a different material. For now, I increased the metallic property of this sphere, which makes it look like this metallic object. And for example, if I reduce the metallic property, it's not going to look that much like a metal anymore. If you see it. Oh, that response time is slow today.
When you consider that slow.
3 isn't enough HP. You need to go up to 6.
Sorry?
We need to increase your power. 3 wasn't
Just get
enough.
just
Go
get an
to
RTX
6.
graphics card.
I know, I mean the updating here. That's pretty. Okay, so if you see there on the monitor right now, you'll see that it's less metallic than before. It's still reflective, but not as much as before because I reduced the metallic level. Now, we're going to learn this later on, but then this is just a demonstration of how versatile a material can be. Same thing here, I can change the color of the material as well as the roughness. So
Does making metallic higher than 1, does it do anything?
Sorry?
Does making metallic more than 1 do anything?
What does making metallic
Yeah, it makes it more
than
metallic. Whoa.
I know, so if you want to do that, you might have to kind of hack into it, but then
I just did it and it worked.
Yeah, it works, but then it's not really gonna do
No,
that
change
much.
it to 11. It really changes.
Yeah, except
Oh.
it's in that if you do it too much, it's going to be a natural material which doesn't reflect how
Dude, it
materials
looks like
act
a
in real
black
life.
hole.
Exactly. You don't want.
That's so cool.
You're
What's
literally
the-
bending light.
Yeah, look at
Yeah.
this.
Wait, is my laptop?
Oh, that's so cool.
Oh my god.
Well, I think it's dead now.
Wait, I want to see
How-
what
Yeah.
9,000 does.
Yeah.
Yeah. So exactly.
I did
So
90,000 and it just looks like.
shh. Okay.
Very
9,000
weird.
is cool.
So also yeah, these are and also lastly the cube in the middle. So you'll notice that it's kind of transparent because it's called the glass shader. Now,
Combine it with a new object.
yeah, as you can see in
Why
the
is it a
side.
sphere in the preview?
Yeah, okay, so the preview doesn't reflect the actual shape in the model. It's just the material on a different object. So also a reminder that
Oh, it is.
these objects you can swap these materials by if you look over here, on the top of the preview there's this little box that has the material name which you can change into say a metal or something like that. But on the side there's the same material logo which gives you a list of all the materials in this box. Oh yeah, you can't see it, right?
What am I looking at? What are we looking at? Oh, they're saying.
Wow.
So if you can see here,
Wow.
yeah, so
It looks like it's reflecting some
yeah,
kind of
so
sound.
over here on the top there you can change the name of the thing, and next to it there's this tab that gives you all the materials in the scene. So for each object you can also change what material it's made out of.
Oh, that's cool.
I want to hear that.
If you put two metallic materials next to each other, can you make them infinitely top of
I will
each other?
smash your prison.
Yes, no. So here's the thing. So you'll notice that the rendering the scene takes a lot of time, but then that's because it bounces off many times, so that's why it takes a lot of time to render. So before we end this session, let's lastly try to render this image much quicker
How?
and see how disgusting it is before we end it. So the amount of bounces, we usually refer that to as samples. So the higher the samples, the more bounces, the more times the light will bounce in the scene, which means the lighting will be much more accurate and beautiful. Except the less it is, it's going to be much more noisy, and you'll see what it means. But then let's learn how to reduce this value. So on the left side, if you go
How
up,
to reduce it if it's bad, or if it makes it worse?
what?
What do you want to reduce?
We don't have much time. Okay, so if you go to the camera icon on the right side, over here, yeah. Then we will be able to see the rendering or render properties. So here, if you on the top, you'll see this thing that says sampling. So as I said before, the amount of these bounces is called samples. Now, right now in the render tab over here, I set the sample as 100. So this doesn't directly mean that it's going to bounce 100 times, but then it's like this basic unit.
How do you get there?
Camera.
Oh,
And then here, sampling.
okay.
Okay, so right now it's at 100, but then let's try to reduce that down to 10. And then, do you remember how to render the image?
Yeah.
You click render.
Render, and then you
Render.
click image.
Yeah, render image.
Where do you do that?
At the top, there's this tab that says render, and if you
It's
hover
still,
over it,
mine still struggles to render.
mine is even worse now.
Wait, you just press render?
It's like rendering the line.
Wait, you just press render up here?
Yeah, click render, and then click render image.
Yeah. So yeah, for example,
How is
for
yours so fast?
mine took.
His is faster than yours.
No, I took 4 seconds.
Apple.
Oh.
No, it's because
It says Apple.
But that's
Apple's
so
fast.
insane. What?
Apple's
Oh yeah,
fast.
okay. Look at this. So.
Ooh, flexing.
the flex.
Wow.
Bruh.
Oh damn. You
Okay.
can't compete. Oh, and this is when he's doing it from a remote computer.
Yeah. So if you can.
Nah, it's part
So
of-
actually, if you come over here,
Mine's still not done.
it's okay. We can do it while it's getting done. So you'll see that.
Whoa, mine
wait,
actually
Are you ready?
rendered pretty nicely.
I like how bad
Okay.
you are at.
So actually, you can see from here. So you'll notice that the rendering here is very grainy, and you see like these little like dusty like this
Noise.
grain here, right?
Is that the noise?
Yeah, that's the noise. So the less the samples are, the more noisy the image is going to be. And there are like different ways to cheat this and kind of fix it, but that's going to come in a later date. But then just tell you that if it's less samples, the image will be much noisier. And as much as that is, like it's going to be harder to see the details of like each material that you make. So yeah, that's one thing. Alright. So what's the time? It's 50. Okay. So I'm going to end the session here. And you can experiment with these materials that I gave you in this box scene over here. So yeah, feel free to do that. And
Hey,
well,
can I
we're
make a suggestion?
yes.
Stop making fun of in your emails.
What?
Stop making fun of in your emails.
I never made fun of you.
You-
Come in case you're struggling.
Okay, you
In
mentioned
case
that
you
yourself.
didn't make
I'm
Okay.
the only one who couldn't make
In
it up.
case you